Good morning and welcome back to the Explicit Measures podcast with Tommy, Seth, and Mike. Hello, everyone. Welcome back.
We're back, baby.
It's been a bit of a break. We are now live again. Mistakes will happen. Errors will be made.
We are live again. Yes, happy Tuesday, gentlemen. And it is a very happy Tuesday in this household. And I think your households as well. Because in the next 25 minutes, kids are back to school. And you know what that means for those of us who mostly work from home?
A break.
It's beautiful.
Quiet, just beautiful, blissful, quiet.
It's that time of year again.
I'm not excited about that at all.
Well,
Right?
It's not like you've just been around your family for way too long now.
Well, coming from like a 2.5 week vacation. We just got back from Europe, so that was a fun trip. Had visited some family and got to see some sights.
See, that's what summer's all about.
With the food, what was the best thing? I mean, it's either food, place you went, or it's probably going to be one of those two, right?
I guess
all right.
Tommy's always with his food.
I have family, extended family by my wife in the Czech Republic. So, cuisine wise, like it's very kind of slow cooked recipes, roast or porks, whatever. The most exciting parts about what they do is one, Czech water is beer.
Oh,
that's what it is.
Really?
Okay.
They have a fantastic. I'm a gluten-free guy, so like can't have gluten. But they
Yeah.
have a local Ferdinand beer that is gluten-free. Fantastic. But
nice.
Yes, they also may or may not know how to make fantastic slivovica in their backyard. Their family in Slovak is
nice,
very, very good at that. So yes, if I was going to talk about the meals, it was usually the precursors up to the meal. There are a few of my favorites, but yeah.
Awesome.
Slivovitz and family.
Amazing. Well, glad to have you back. Glad to get jumping back in here. I think Tommy's been going through withdrawal the last 2 weeks. Just a little bit. He's been itching to get back onto the podcast and talking about some things coming out here. So let's just kick off some things with some openers. Tommy, you found one, this thing called Cursor, cursor.so. It's some code that it's an AI feature. Tommy's all about the AI. I'll say this. Every time Tommy shows up to a meeting, there's another AI thing showing up and he's telling me something else new.
Seriously, man?
That's happening. Give us the rundown.
Yeah.
What is this thing you found?
So it's really like VS Code. And for those who've worked with VS Code, it's basically that on steroids with AI. Not only just like how VS Code has, has Copilot. Well, what you can actually do is go through your entire code base, go through a certain code, or even say generate this for me kind of thing, and it works really well. But what I wanted to try out, because obviously you're thinking mostly developers, you're doing something Python or Jupyter. I'm like, if I can integrate and index any documentation, because that was one of the things.
Yes.
I wonder if I did DAX. And I basically asked it something pretty simple. And I just said, hey, I have 2 tables that are like this based on DAX guide. Generate for me a rolling 60 days in the previous rolling. Wouldn't you know it? It was pretty much on point.
Yeah.
And I've been testing that out a bunch too. So I need to put some more up there, but I'll send the Twitter link because it's kind of incredible. It's really incredible.
So why is this different than other AIs? And based on your little demo, Tommy, that you kind of published here, the idea here is when you run this AI, you're able to send it like a URL or a documentation library and say, hey, here's some information that you need to know before I talk to you. And you basically sent them, the Italians right here, go to dax.guide, know this information, and then use that to help you write formulas. And you said it was pretty on point for finding code snippets and examples in there, which, believe it or not, between their website with blog articles and then all of the dax.guide information as well, it's pretty comprehensive. I mean, if you could pick in a couple more interesting or useful sites around that, you could enhance that even further. Pick SQLBI.com, pick dax.guide, and maybe a couple other really relevant areas as well.
So this to me has been one of the more incredible, honestly, like things out there. Again, even especially now too, with a lot of people as we're going into more Python, more Jupyter notebooks and engineering.
Yeah.
Where I start, hey, give me, and again, the documentation could be anything you choose, just the LinkedIn index.
Sure.
One of the last thing I'll say is you can actually just say, hey, create a new project for me. This is what I want to do. It created for me. You're going to love this. It created for me both. I have now a Python package and a PowerShell module completely for PBI tools, the command line with helpers. So, which is great. Yeah.
That's pretty cool. So this is, I think this is going to be continually the challenge here moving forward with anything AI related. It'll be the ability to say, okay, these things are going to provide immense amount of value because it has a wealth of knowledge behind it. But will it work well? Will it, the discernment value of, is this right? Did it, what they call when it lies? It's like, is it hallucinating or not? So like you'll get a DAC statement out of it. Is it the right way to go about it? Is this the most efficient way to build a DAC statement? It may get the job done. So yeah, I'll have to play with it a little bit more and see where it comes out and if it's adding value for me as well. Pretty cool stuff. Nice find on that one, Tommy. The only other thing, so since we've been gone for a while here, a lot of things have been happening. One other one I'll throw down here is the Power BI August feature summary has been released. So there's some new features. So quickly want to run that by you guys and see if there's any features that stood out to you. It seemed fairly light from a Power BI perspective. I know a lot of things are being developed and or created inside Fabric at this point. So I've been kind of watching both the Fabric blog and the Power BI blog. Power BI just seems it's okay. But the Fabric side of things, it looks like there's a lot of things that have been produced there. But focusing just solely on the August update. I think some of the new reporting features here, they added this, well, I think this is kind of funny to me. They added a new layout switcher to switch between a desktop mode and a mobile mode. So you can build reports in mobile or desktop as if it was like a landscape, a report page. And I'm like, well, that's nice that you actually added some buttons for that, because likely no one knew they were there, nor does anyone ever build reports for mobile. So I think that's probably a reason why they exposed actual buttons for it that live on the page every day. I don't really love these buttons. I'm like, you're just taking away more of my landscape space for the tabs on the page at the bottom of my, like, this is where I'm kind of like, what is going on, Microsoft? Put the icons on that left-hand nav bar that's just sitting there totally empty, not using a lot of space. So I'm not sure if I really love the placement of these icons, but yes, it has been added. Any other features you guys found and stuck out to you?
I do like the enhancement around the Power BI project file.
Oh, yes.
To publish directly from that.
Yes, that is a brand new thing.
It's a ease of use feature, I think, that should be one that's going to be useful as people start to integrate and use the PBIP file.
Yes,
a lot more.
It serves us very well because we've been building scrims or entire reports now with the theme generator. The theme generator now supports the downloading of the PBIP file format. You can build your own pages. You can add background images to them as needed. But now you don't have to resave it as a PBIX. You can literally download the whole entire project and then publish right from there, right to the service, which is awesome. So I was doing some testing of that this week as well. Yeah, that's a great point out.
To be a huge time saver, right? Like using our tool.
Oh, totally.
You like for folks that don't know, we talk about it a lot, but it's not just the themes, right? We can create and manage every aspect of a theme, but now with the wireframe, background images, all the actual visuals themselves, download, and then just add your data and your model. And yeah, a huge time saver. But then this is just like another ease of use thing where it's like download it here and then just publish it.
Yeah,
added those small elements like the actual data.
Exactly right.
That wasn't in the article, right? Was that in?
That was at the bottom.
Yeah, it's kind of towards the bottom of the article.
After all of the mobile updates,
it's in the developers area.
Use your startup content developers.
Yeah.
Second one under developers.
Publish a PBIP file directly to the service.
Yeah, it's interesting to me though that a lot of it is kind of user visual formatting kind of things.
You talking about
But
this
yeah,
recent
the
update?
updated, the whole update itself, but it's
Yeah.
like a lot of focus on the third party
Yes.
tools, and some of those are the third party visuals, Zoom charts.
Yep.
Looks like some of those are those are always worthwhile, I think, to cycle through every once in a while, just understand like how much time and effort is being put into some of those visualizations.
Yes.
And I'm glad they're calling them out. I'm just a little disappointed that like I don't see any other intrinsic like in tool modifications to
Yeah.
some of the visualizations that that we know are being worked on. But
You get a new
knock 'em
bubble
out.
scale. So new bubble scale arranging because of all those bubble charts you use.
Mhm.
So that's incredibly helpful.
Thanks for pointing that one out, Mike. I appreciate it.
That's like
I might
the
I
one
might have missed
visual.
that one. I might have missed that one.
Not on your top 10 list there. You don't use bubble charts every single day.
I may or may not have spent some dollars towards, like I just saying.
Amazing. Any other thoughts before we get into the topic for today?
Just good to be back.
Yeah, it is good to be back. Yeah, I was talking with Tommy offline. It's like it kind of feels like this is almost like my therapy session to some degree. Like I have some other people who understand the pains, the issues, the challenges that go along with like reporting and working with. It's the whole. There's people problems, there's process problems, and there's technology problems, and all these things keep moving at the same time. So it's kind of nice having other people who understand how these three things integrate so well together.
I'm glad I can be here for you, and I'm glad I'm part of this group that we can.
Hi, I'm Mike. I'm here to.
Hi, Mike.
Right.
I work with
My
data.
name's Seth. Data, and guys, data is hard.
Ooh.
Which brings us kind of into our topic today. So that's really a good lead in. So this is a post. The link is in the description of the video. And we'll also grab the LinkedIn post here from Benjamin. And we'll throw this down here in the chat window just in case people want to follow along and read it. So this is a chat thread kind of talking about working in data is hard. So just kind of a really interesting topic here. Kind of taking something from the interwebs and going through a simple example here of maybe. So for those who have been listening to this is a U.S. economy kind of thing as well. So there's an example given in this that talks about SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, I believe is the acronym there. And they had some internal data. I guess they were working on their analyst team or whatever. Their internal data or the model that was telling them where is the risk inside their company was highlighting the fact that when interest rates go up, the bank will struggle, right? So this is kind of a bit of talking through this and balancing what do executives want to see versus what does the data show, and what are we actually being actionable on data. So let me pause right there. It's kind of the introduction to the article. Tommy, you want to lead us in here? Any other additional thoughts around this blog post or things you want to kind of call out here?
Man, if this didn't ring like hurt almost reading it, just from past experiences, just
Really?
it brought up some post trauma and just working in this industry where you just believe in the data, you believe in, like showcasing whatever was right, getting that insights unlocking, and then people just don't like what they see, and everything like either a project dies or people move on. And
isn't there a phrase called like manifesting? Like when you like, your sales are up 10%. Sales are up 10%. You keep saying it like over and over, and it becomes true just by like thinking positive thoughts. Is that what that phrasing is? Is you're running into the idea that people are trying to manifest their will on top of the data? I want our investments to go the right way, kind of thing.
I'll do one better.
Okay.
I mean, again, just even going along with this, when I was a lowly data analyst, I was doing finally like a KPI dashboard based on the targets. I'm like, hey, where do the targets come from? Because we can project it. They're like, oh, we just add 15% every year. It's like,
yes, like major targets, like revenue, like
kind of thing. And it's like, okay. I mean, we could look at things and, and begin to actually make this little thing. No, this is what we want. And well, sales is actually different because they don't want to do 15, so it's 5%. You're like, what? So the idea where you feel like you have all these insights that you can bring and you can have everyone to kind of, exactly see what they're doing. That the idea where, sometimes people will kill it because they don't like what the output is, or they don't believe in it, or they just, it's different from expectation, which is crazy.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because I feel like YouTube is so smart. I'll say that just off the cuff there. When I listen to, I sit and I scroll a lot of YouTube shorts and things and watch a lot of articles, and I've been watching a lot of news or opinions about the economy in general. And Tommy, to your point there, the ability to have, this concept of struggling with the data and working through these things. This is a very real concept, and I think that the data is difficult because there's like you come into things and there can be noise in your data. And I was watching a little article around, or someone was making some fun of something. It was along the idea of, you know, not every business always grows at 10% every year. I mean, there has been some businesses that have been very like stagnant and they just maintain for numbers of years before something in the market changes. Someone leaves the market, they get more market share, whatever that is, and then they're able to grow again. So I think there's this misnomer, or sometimes when we think about, hey, why isn't the business growing the same way every single year? Well, that is not always going to happen. There's going to be times where it grows. There's times when we're not going to grow.
Yeah, I think there's two things I want to point out. One is our conversation points are probably going to dovetail into some areas that are not particularly applicable to this scenario, right? SVP, but it drives this sort of conversation around what are the challenges that we face in our day-to-day working with data and people or objectives within an organization, because
Totally.
the one that overrides, and what I'm hearing you guys kind of say under the covers right now, are where there times where an objective or directive is completely superseding reality, right? Where all, like, you may have these major initiatives and everybody throughout executive to management are driving behind them, and you're almost building a culture of fear behind that if actual reality and data, and typically it's people who work with data all the time, where you start to see things not aligning with where we want to be.
Sure.
And I think a lot of the conversation today is going to be around data culture and how do we potentially work through situations, and or not. As it pertains specifically to like SVP here, I think there are some areas that I'll want to talk about like process. But in this case, in reading, and Mike, I think you might have the original link from Washington Post.
Yeah, I do have the original link.
Like there's a lot of this wasn't just like a one person disagreed and a model changed, right? Like there was process. There was a risk management team. There were so many things in place that were like check that box. Yep, we're going to modify this. We're going to do these things. And I think so it doesn't, this situation doesn't fall in line that there was no process, there was no regulation. It was reported to federal and state that this was changing, so there's a lot of things involved, and it's not just one person that made a decision. And then on the flip side, articles like this are easy to write because hindsight's 2020.
Totally.
Right? Like all these employees are like, I said this. I said that this model change was going to break everything. But in reality, like even in the article, they say like, well, this was also like there was precedence for this. It's not like this was the first time this had ever happened. It just, there was the sweet spot of the calamity of the, economic change and radical shift where, interest rates had to, increase. And, like the things coming out of that story, I think provide the full context where, glibly we're talking about this in the scope of other areas, or, apparently Tommy's traumatic experience today, which we'll give you hugs, Tommy. Like that's what this is about.
This is the therapy session.
We're here for you.
We're helping here.
You won't walk through this with you. We're there. But ultimately, in the LinkedIn post, there was a comment by Yuki Kakagawa that I really loved. And he just said, this is all about company culture. Data-driven decisions are not the same as taking only what you like from data. And I think that's where a lot of the conversation for me is going to go today, where around like, what is that stress point, right? Where, how do we make sure that we validate data? How do we create, these value to the business? But are there times where the business doesn't want that because of these other initiatives? So there's a lot going on today. We'll see where we mix out, we flesh out.
Yeah, I agree. I think this is a great topic. I think it's super relevant. I liked how your summary there, Seth, kind of pulled together a lot of key points around those areas. I think this is I think it's a very good and as I read through the article here, so going back to the Washington Post article that you pointed out, I actually put that in the chat window as well. So if you want to read along with there as well, there I was reading through there, and about halfway through, I kind of started highlighting a couple notes here. A lot of this comes from the top down, right? So a portion of it, we're saying a lot of the profit-driven strategy of the entire the bank was driven top down. It was very top down driven. Look, we're going to be profit based. This is what we're looking for. So therefore, aggressive moves were taken to be able to make that profit that we want, so that we can have that high growth rate that we need as a bank. And so then on, it says here in the article, on March 8th, they're forced to liquidate a bunch of things and take out a loss of 1.8 billion, which is a huge amount of money to take a loss on when you're talking about a bank. But to your point, something that stuck out to me here, Seth, was this is a bank. This is a very highly regulated market and area. Like, this stuff happens. Like, and this is an area where there's a lot of scrutiny. There's a lot of eyes on it. There's a lot of regulation around that industry. Yeah. So for them to even get wrapped around the axle around their data and make decisions based on their information to get themselves in trouble, imagine how much more this is occurring in business units or other companies that are not as tightly regulated federally. So it's a tricky topic.
Yeah, and that's where, like, one of the before I went super sleuthing and like back to the original article. One of the things I was going to talk about, like, was a major breakdown in process or procedures, right? Because if we think about like the key reports, and we talk about like governance and making sure that there's data quality that goes up through reporting. There's a reason why you build checks and balances up through things, not just for trust of data, but it's because in certain scenarios, like let's say there is a key KPI metric that is part of your dashboard that says we are running a healthy business, right? And then we make a decision, or the company makes a decision to radically put ourselves in a position where, hey, maybe there's this massive growth opportunity and we're going to pursue that. And the ramifications of that decision start to be realized in the data, and all of a sudden your KPIs start turning red. What do you do, right? Like, what do you fall back on? Well, instantly everybody's going to be like, okay, let's validate that this is accurate, which is 100% true. Like, let's do that. But when you have those processes in place, check all the boxes. We're monitoring everything. Like, the data's coming through the same way. This ties back. This is a result of us, as an organization, understanding that we're going down this route with the objectives. Then it gets put on leadership, right? Like, okay, do we shift course? Do we do things differently? Or in this case, like, let's just say, well, do we modify how we calculate the healthiness of our business? And what do you do in those situations where it's like, like, as an employee, you're trusting that the leadership team is driving you in the right direction, and that they understand the dynamics of, in totality, the business, and making modifications to certain things with checks and balances in place, should absolutely be able to happen. Now, since like that falls off pretty quickly in the banking industry, where it's like, okay, well, maybe not, but I mean, there is that there's, I think, room for disagreement is what I'm saying.
Yes.
Versus where sounds like Tommy's been, where it's just like, yeah, no, man. Like nothing you're saying is making sense. And we would never take this metric and pollute it, because that would mean that you don't know what you're doing, right? Because there's no doubt, there's no upside to that decision, right? Outside of you wanting to manipulate something so you look good,
Yes.
which is a playing field in here.
Man,
Well,
this
it's
is
not.
so many topics here. Go ahead, Tommy.
I mean, it's not even just the looking good. What I've seen it continually be, it seems always to be about expectations and what people expect the numbers to be, which is kind of the idea of
But
we've
what
dealt
are
with
the
this already.
drivers of those expectations?
That's what I was going with
Right?
this.
That's what I
this
mean
point.
by look good, right?
Yeah.
Because that's where data culture plays a huge role in this, right? Because what drives bad it's kids, man. What drives bad behavior? Like you set an unattainable goal, like my kid's starting soccer again. Apparently, like new head coach, one of the things she said right off the bat is like, if I find out that grandparents or parents are paying their children for goals, you're off the team. And I was like, wait a minute, what? That's a
People-
thing?
You're like,
Right,
Seth, you're
because
like, I didn't know I could pay people.
The goal for the kid is, I don't care about the team. I'm going to score a goal.
Mm.
Right?
Yeah.
So in the same drives for a business, like what are the drivers for people's motivation, right? And if you're reporting to somebody and their number is 20 and your report is saying 17, but 20 gets a bonus, what's the motivator for good behavior? Well, you're driving bad behavior in business, because they're going to start to do, some individuals will choose that they want 20. Tommy, make it 20.
But
How much do they pay per goal? That's where. That's where. I mean, is this like $5 a goal, or are we talking like $10? I mean, are these grandparents well off? I mean, I need to know here,
right?
because this, I might be able.
This is exactly what I'm talking about.
Exactly. And how much money do these grandparents have? I mean, I don't understand. Like, are they
Like,
shelling $100 per game? You know,
hey, or if another kid finds out, hey, psst,
yeah,
I know I can.
yes, exactly.
Right, like you pay me the money.
Pass to me, so I'll give you a cut of the
Yeah.
I'll give you a cut of the profits at the end here. Sorry, I didn't mean. I've never even heard of that. I mean, wow. I mean, but again, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Tommy, but I just was that just struck me as funny. And go ahead, Tommy, jump in there.
It's like how everyone already had a hunch in terms of like how they worked for years and aeons before, where they kind of had some data, but they felt this way, or they wanted kind of what, not even they want the data to be something, but they had a project, or they want a hunch. It's like, no, don't bother me with the complete actuals, where this is how we've been operating as an organization, because it's usually not just one person. And there's probably also, I've seen this too, not that I felt bad, but a lot of times there a good amount of times where it's not necessarily the executive, but that's occurred where someone's on so much pressure to achieve a certain number or a certain rate, and to show anything that's drastically below that would either mean that the last few years that they've been trying to look at the numbers is completely wrong. This is not just a random, no, I don't like that. The reason why it's off from their expectations is because for however long they've been there, or the company's been working, they always assumed that there's a baseline or a threshold, and they kind of been operating off that. So it's kind of like you're almost like introducing a new reality.
There's a question that keeps coming to my head here, and I've been taking notes here on the side. One of them keeps coming up with a little bit of data culture question around this topic. This to me, this article feels a little bit around the data culture of the bank was in a place where profits before all else, and it was so driven on that. And again, I think there's a mindset here that they need to take aggression if they're going to be able to play well. There's a lot of other people playing in this game as well. But to your point, Tommy, earlier, you said, the company says, hey, our goal is 10% more this year than last year. And my question is, do you really understand your business? Do you really understand what makes your business tick? And I think this is what you were alluding to, Seth, a little while ago, was do you know what drives more revenue or more sales in your company? Is it more phone calls? Is it more boots on the ground? Is it more marketing? Is it what are the data points that you're using to influence? Okay, if I want to get a 10% growth, what actions can I take right now to make that work? And Tommy, to your point there, right? When that number comes out of the thin air, have we looked at the growth year over year for the last 5 years? What does that look like? Were there any market conditions that were influencing things? I was just talking with someone the other day around AI and the idea of the pandemic has really messed with everyone's forecasting because there's this huge dip in certain business markets that made a huge impact, and some people were buying things out of fear, and so there's these huge spikes in consumption, and then other people were not, and people were really cutting back for periods of time because things just got very nervous. And so the whole like looking at the experience across the markets, there's a lot of influences here that can really tell your business if you're up or down. And I think, to your point, Tommy, earlier, that 10% up or down is so arbitrary. They're not even. Are we using data even to do that analysis? I think there's a question here. Do you even understand your data, your business?
I think you make a good point, because in banking here, right, especially if there was precedence. Okay, say you're going to lead at a high level of risk, and you're going to redefine your models, right?
Yeah.
Redefining the model shouldn't be like, we're going to pretend we don't have risk, or maybe they redefine the model to like there is no bank, so obviously it wasn't done right. Like what are the new indicators that tell you you're in trouble, right? Because it's very the other thing I want to be aware of here is it's very easy for us to fall into this 2020 mindset of like, oh, I'm an employee, and like I know that the CFO, the chief, the CEO, they led this the wrong way.
Yeah.
Well, leading is significantly different than following. Okay, one. And a perfect example of this, in some scenarios, there is no precedent.
Yeah.
Like Kodak, as a camera company. Right?
Yeah, I saw an article about them recently.
Largest in the world.
Yeah.
And they had a person come in and say like, "Hey, I developed digital cameras," and they were like, "No
way, not going to happen.
Business is predicated on film. We're not going to do that." Where are they? Bankrupt.
Yeah, gone.
There is no precedent for that. There is no data indicator. Like, unless you're like, oh, hey, let's look out in the market for some leading indicator of our competitors doing something that we're going to turn down, right? So
interesting.
Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, it's not as black and white. And I guess maybe that's where the lead into, there's a fine line between, data that, and the types of information, right? Like the type of value that we bring. Are we just showing you like what currently is happening, right? Are we being predictive about things? Are we being prescriptive with like, what are you doing with the data that is being provided from within the organization? I think that's also one of the main reasons why we as data people are like, you better put all that together, because it's a extremely valuable resource for your executive team to understand holistically how the business is doing. And that's why you go through these massive efforts to consolidate data to the point where you can report it in valuable metrics, right? But none of this to me is black and white. And that's like, I guess, the point between, when we're communicating about data versus people's like objectives and what we need to do as a company, because our leaders are saying that there is a fine line in here. But I think the difference is data should lead the conversation, right? If we've gotten to the point where we created all of these metrics to show indicators about the health of the business, then we have to be constantly reevaluating the business to ensure that our directives or our objectives are the right one and we're being successful. Because if we're not, we have some difficult choices to make. And I think what happens here is like, you can't, the same way we build a report or try to build a data culture, right? A leader is trying to drive growth in the business continually. Okay. But what does that take? Constant evaluation. Are we doing it right? How do I know I'm doing it right? Here's the data that says you're doing it right, right? Here's the data that says you're doing it wrong. Whoa, if we're doing it wrong, do we ride this? If we ride it, how long? Like, and that's, I think, the cycle that all of us, especially as you drive into leadership positions, have to reevaluate everything we're doing. Same way we do development, right? You're constantly, I'll give you version 1 and I'm moving on to version 2, version 3. We're constantly evaluating whether or not, like, our choice, our direction, our build of something that's larger and larger and larger is on the right tracks. And sometimes it's not, right? Sometimes we need to reevaluate. Sometimes, especially related to like people, right?
Mhm.
So it's like,
Mhm.
hey, what I'm trying here is not working. And the more indicators I have that tell me whether or not it's working, the better off we're going to be. But at the same time, like, this isn't, we're definitely in the realm, I think, of people having to make hard choices. And then those ramifications of the choices get larger and larger and larger, depending on how high up in the organization, how large that directive is. Because if you're gonna say, hey, we're gonna go launch the strategic initiative, and you guys have both been part of this, right? Like, we're gonna launch this huge thing, and I'm sure, like, Mike, you're passing Johnson controls. Okay, we're gonna spend
Mhm.
$5 million, and then at the end of 3 months, we got nothing.
I've seen
That's hard.
projects.
That's hard too, right?
I've seen mismanaged projects where things have spent a lot of money and all of a sudden the product just no longer exists. We walked away. It was invested heavily, and the business decided to move away from that. I'm thinking to myself, there is so much opportunity here, and now there's so much waste that has come out of it. Yes, we have some IP around it. Yes, there's some things here that have been value added, but at the end of the day, you're looking at it going, why does that product not exist now? What happened? So to your point though, there a lot of people I think are trying to very much meter and measure this. I believe I watched again the things that I consume. I saw a YouTube short around someone talking about a new employee talking to Satya Nadella, and so I think Seth, as MVPs, we got the book from Satya, Hit Refresh, I believe is what it was.
Yep.
And I think you read that one, but I think so if we think about Microsoft has kind of gone through a transformation as well. They've gone through a very shift in how they do business, from a very developer-centric area to more of like a business user-centric arena, I feel like. And I'm very excited about where their products is going and what they're doing. But one of this YouTube short was emphasizing was Satya would sit and listen to people and people who were new to the company, brand new people to the company. Tell me what's going on. What do you see happening? What are the things that are good that are happening, and what are the things that are challenging that are happening? And trying to really, as a leader, yes, you lead, but I think to your point, Seth, this is, I think, dovetailing very well in this topic, right? As we look at these KPIs, as we look at the metrics, the people who understand how the business is running are the people that are running the business.
Mm-hmm.
Are we listening to them? Are we hearing what they're saying and not overriding our desire for the business above what my team and my people are saying?
And there's nuance here too, right? Because in a healthy organization, every worker all the way down understands what the objectives are of the company. But unfortunately, that's not always the way.
You want that to be that way,
right?
Yeah.
So there are cases where you may have an employee who's like, no, the data is saying this, right? Like, this is what it's showing, because they only understand 60% of the problem that their manager or whoever above is trying to solve.
Sure.
And then they get overridden, right? No, you're wrong.
Yeah.
Because they're not being told that there's a whole other 40% where the request was, you provide me this information, provide me this metric. I'm going to go own this. I'm going to export it. I'm going to add my other 40% of secret sauce that I'm not going to tell you about, because I'm going to control the whole thing. And that's just not healthy, right? Like, because then you don't open opportunities for everyone in the organization to make a difference, right? And I think that's where a lot of the self-service BI, a lot of the challenge, like the things that we're interested in promoting, is access to data. It's everybody should have access to these things to ask questions, because what happens when everybody's asking questions? Well, we come to an agreement, right? There's a definition, there's a standard we start to create within our organization. Everybody starts to understand how this works. So everybody is becoming more data literate. And
Yeah.
the more refinement we can make in an organization, because more people have access to the right types of data, and obviously there are certain aspects of data that require more security.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like it is an open environment where the best ideas win, as opposed to a controlling environment where only certain people win because they control the messaging. Because ultimately, it's the message of what the data is giving us.
Mhm.
It's not the data itself. It's, hey, what is it is telling me? And that is subjective to some degree,
Yeah.
but shouldn't be subjective to every degree, right?
True.
It should, hey, I'm interpreting this way. I think this is why this is happening. Do you think the same thing? Here's this report. Here's the data that we're pulling, blah, 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 right? As opposed to, give me the numbers. Here are the numbers. Oh, great job. 20% again. Man, that's like 6 quarters in a row. Everybody else is failing and you're not. Man, great job.
It's the pressure that's puts on from there. Yeah, totally.
But that's that's I think is a contributing factor.
So how do you, so as I think through this one, well, a couple of things come to mind, and another comment I wrote down here is, how do you know when the business is in trouble? Is kind of like my first question. How do we know when this is the culture isn't aligned right to finding these KPIs? And Tommy, you were saying very
What has
earlier,
your experience has been? I know exactly, because I've been with a company that went through bankruptcy.
Yeah.
So I have a very strong opinion about this one.
Okay.
Do you guys have any indicators, like for companies that you've worked with?
I kind of want you to go. You kind of set that up really well.
I go last.
So I will say, I think there are some signs of unhealthiness, I would say, as when I think about this in certain companies. One of them is you overvalue or you overrate the skills on your teams in the organization. So when you talk to people, they are saying, we're experts in this area. And when experts show up and talk to people, you find that there's not that skills that we need. So maybe that's something that is, there is a little bit of smoke and mirrors that are occurring, right? You can tell everyone's trying to make everything appear to be correct, or the data culture is not there from a data standpoint. So that would be one indicator that I would find there. You're hearing things like the operating system that makes the data doesn't necessarily align to how you report on the data and make the business run. So whenever I hear the word reallocation or allocate, it is kind of a signal to myself that says something in the design of the system to get data out of the transactional system, the system that makes you money, into the reporting system to help you analyze your data. When we start reallocating things, it means there's a disconnect to what the business wants to do to run the company versus how we're capturing and catching data. So that's where sometimes you get a lot of the smoke and mirrors. How we can make the numbers look correct. So that's one signal. Another signal I would say that I have found is when there's too many pivoting directions. So I feel like sometimes it's good to pivot. It's good to change directions when market conditions are changing. But if you see too many directional shifts on what you're trying to accomplish, or scope creep on projects keep getting larger and larger and larger, these are the kind of projects that fail. And I've been around some IT projects that have been quite large. Moving an entire manufacturing company from the legacy system into a new system, right? Spent millions of dollars trying to transition from one system to another. Didn't work well because there was a resistance at the people level. There was a culture shift that needed to happen, and the teams were not brought along with that. And I think there's a resistance to when you are doing large projects, particularly in the IT space. I feel like there's this idea of what is our process and what is the new technology that we're bringing in. And sometimes you have to negotiate on both of them. Sometimes you customize the technology, and sometimes you customize the process. And having that flexibility to really sit back and evaluate what do we switch, what do we adjust, can really help that business run one way or another. So those may be my two main points that tell me there's some warning signs in there. Not saying that those are 100% true, but they seem to be indicators, and we're not maybe the last part here I would say is maybe there's not that success or wins of success with customers, right? If you're not solving problems, if you're not meeting customers' needs, if you're not producing satisfaction, someone smaller, more nimble, easier can come right along the way and just repeat what you do. So those would be maybe a couple things that I would say, indicators that would tell me potentially something's wrong there. Tom, anything that you've observed?
I think the biggest thing is it's a culture thing, is because it's usually not just going to be one person or a few group of people that kind of have the same tendencies, because it really is truly a cultural thing. So I think it's a habitual thing, and I think part of it, to be completely honest, I think it starts with the types of requests that you're actually getting, and truly, like, in terms of like what are people actually asking for in the first place, and two, what are they doing right now in a sense to like the back and forth with you? Is it just, hey, show me the data, show me a report, we want to see everything integrated in one place? Or are they actually saying, I want to see how my team's doing, because based on this and the type of action that they're actually asking for? I think even those who have the Excel sheets or those other systems, I think there's still that lack of trust. So are they asking you to actually, in a sense, dive in and then showcase to their team how everyone's doing or how project's doing? Or is that still, in a sense, kept hidden? We don't want that actually in the portal. And part of that too is also from the leadership too on, how much are they pushing towards you, and they pushing towards the team on, we only want certain requests. But honestly, to me, if you're getting a lot of requests that are just, "Hey, we just need our data in Power BI, we just need to see the last 12 months." I think anytime you start to introduce anything that would potentially show potentially show a performance metric, people are going to be a little hesitant. And I think the other part of that too is the other kind of big indicator, um, is that communication. Like, how well can you talk to them about what they want? Or I guess, are they a little more intent in a turn, like hesitant to try to, and since like, hey, you're just doing the data guy, you're not supposed to look at, these things, or we don't want to see what's under the rock. And that's kind of what I've always said is people just don't want to know what's really under the rock.
Mm.
A lot of, because sometimes it's hard to tell if people are going to trust it or not. But the big indicator, if you're starting to build some of these reports and you're just in the sandbox phase and people are freaking out and getting defensive because something's not what they expected to be, that's a watch out for me.
That sounds like a data culture challenge there, that people aren't able to communicate. So this is what we've talked about in the podcast before, right? Communicating with data is a thing, like being able to communicate, voice what's going on with that, and having people that understand it and are receptive to that. Yeah, without that capability, you lose the conversation.
Yeah,
I like that one as well. All right, Seth, we've given you some. Did we hit on any of the ones that you were observing during your time when you went through that company transition?
You did. I think several of my points all revolve around when and how a company communicates with its employees. But you guys drove, I think, in the mix here in culture and some specific areas. I think from my experience are definite indicators, right? Like one, first and foremost. So when is a company in trouble from Seth's perspective? when there's no clear and or achievable goals or plans to achieve those goals, right? Like if we aren't on the same page in driving towards excellence in some arena, what we're just keeping the lights on? Like what is the purpose for us all being here? A second one are, and I put in quotes, the drivers are not happy. And these are the key playmakers. Everybody we work with in an organization, who the people are that are going to get something done.
Yes.
And who the people are who are not. Or it requires a lot of effort to get them into a state of performance. The vast majority of people are more or less just there to collect a check. And there's a laissez-faire kind of attitude towards doing a job, which is unfortunate, I think, but is reality. You have far less drivers or people who can influence the way a company succeeds,
Hmm.
that always exists in every company.
That's an
So
interesting.
if
I
they're
like that
not
point.
happy,
Yeah,
then you start to lose
they leave.
the well, they
The
could leave.
talent. They talent.
They
You get
lose
that
their
brain drain.
motivation. They
Yeah.
lose their motivation to stay on top of everybody else, to rise, bring them up to achieve goals.
Mm-hmm.
And when that happens, like goals start to output starts to go down.
Mm-hmm.
So I
Interesting.
think those on a lower level, right?
Yeah.
Like we don't know where we're going,
Yeah.
and the people who can make a difference are either no longer interested because they don't have clear goals and there's no real reason to go after them anymore, and
Yeah.
they're kind of in a state where probably looking, because it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work to bring
Totally.
other people along for a ride or hit goals and things like that. And then like I think it dovetails into like how a company talks to its employees. Transparency of company health, right? Like, and these are typically in quarterly meetings. If you're lucky, you have monthly, right?
Yeah.
Where the business is engaging with the employees on a regular basis. The warning signs in there for me was where, especially as data people, when there's a disparity between our day to day and our understanding of the health of certain areas of the business,
Yes.
and then what's being told us in the quarterly data projection, like that alignment
Yes.
not being so great is where you start to go like, well, I know they're not pulling it from this, like.
Well,
That's
it's also
kinda odd.
we as a data team, there are a lot of smoke and mirrors that can happen there. But on the data team, you can go do your own analysis. You can actually there's things that you see.
Right.
You
I have
maybe
access to all the same things.
you maybe have a little bit a little bit more privy to
Um,
data that is like telling you these direction things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the last two would be like they're just not talking about current state, right?
Mm.
Everything is future. Everything is big wins. It's the next big
Interesting.
thing. It's the next big thing that we're going to sell. Everything is predicated
That's a really
on that,
good one.
without telling you like, well, what is our current state? Like, what actions are we taking to, if things aren't great, how are we fixing that? Like, where are we missing? What do we have to go? What is our go-to-market strategy going to be? Like,
Hmm.
everything can't be the next big win, right?
Mhm.
And that's where I've seen in the past where you have certain like leaders of sales teams guaranteeing, yep, like, you guys build me this, and yep,
They will sell
we're
it and they
gonna
will
be
come.
gold, and it never works.
Even at the
never.
macro level, I would say that's even in the report. Why are we getting no usage in this report? Well, it's just the colors aren't right. The
I
background,
need this, right?
Yeah.
This is my fire drill. I need it. And then like 2 weeks
Yeah.
later, you're like, if everybody needed this, why are 5 people looking at it?
Wow.
Right? Same sort of deal, right? And that's
really
where
good.
that's where having that process as a BI developer is extremely important. Weighing the pros and all of us should be weighing the pros and cons of like somebody's fire drill versus overall company objectives. But if I don't know what the company objectives are, I can't push back, right? I can't say
100%.
like what you're asking for is a you thing, right? Like I'll
Yeah.
put it on the back burner, but I'm not going to like, this isn't going to like uber critical where I'm going to stay up all night to produce this for you because it doesn't align with anything, right?
Yes.
And then the final one is like where employees are more upset after company meetings than they were before the company meeting.
That's a good barometer right there.
It's a good barometer.
Wow.
So those are from arenas where working for certain small companies and things that didn't fare so well are some indicators I've lived through that things aren't so fantastic.
I found
Maybe you want to keep the resume updated.
when people start polishing resumes, when you look at the number of minutes the company spent on LinkedIn or jobfinder.com, when you watch the web traffic and those numbers start upticking, there's a potential problem there. It's interesting you mentioned that point there, Seth. And I was literally scrolling through LinkedIn the other day and I bookmarked it's like a cheat sheet. It's called Setting Priorities, the Ultimate Cheat Sheet. And I'll put the chat here in the window here for you to go jump on this one. So I'd be curious if you guys hit that link, check it out here real quick. But the idea is it's a single one pager and it talks about how can you set priorities for an individual, for a team, and for a leader. And it kind of just very briefly summarizes different methods. And I really liked the little the Eisenhower matrix method, which is one that stood out to me when you were saying that stuff, Seth. Right? on it's a XY coordinated chart. It has 4 boxes on it. Is the task urgent and important? Do it right away. Is the task not urgent but important? Decide and block time for it in the future, right? Is the task urgent and unimportant? You delegate it, right? We have to get something done, but it's not important. Someone else can do it. And then if the task is not urgent and unimportant, delete it. Just take it off the list. So I liked this little infographic because it was like really neat for like these different methods about how do you evaluate what should we be working on. And I think to your last point there, or a couple of your points there towards the end there, Seth, sometimes we're working on the wrong things. Sometimes we've prioritized things in an incorrect way, and having a method on how you can evaluate what do we work on, where do we focus our time.
Yeah, and but that's constant too, and that's
Constant.
why it's so important that
Agree.
companies have OKRs or OGSMs or like
Yes.
alignment, because that's where teams collectively marry up, right? Like, okay, more than happy to help you out, business person A. Like, what objective is this? Is this like helping you achieve in this quarter?
Yes.
Well, it's not.
Why are we doing
Okay,
it?
well, then I'm not serving my purpose, which is to assist you in achieving all these other objectives. Like, what is the driver for this request? Are we going to make a special exception? You know, which can be had, but at the same time, like, I would say, rather than like taking on special exceptions, it's more often than not that like work groups just find themselves like down in some rabbit hole without reevaluating whether or not they should be there.
Yeah.
And that is unfortunately the case, where like this is where that comment about constant reevaluation, whether that's at the very highest level with the highest level objectives. Are we going in the right direction? What's the litmus? You know, and to my comments to Mark, who had a great question about like always talking about what's next. Well, yes, we should be talking about what's next, but we should also be talking about like, hey, that thing that was in the future, how did we do? Did we win? Did we lose?
Yes.
Like, how are we progressing? Like, what is the current state of these things? Because what we talked about should now be current state. And if it's always future and we're never talking about like win and loss and like making hard decisions or shifting goals or shifting, you know, then we're not doing things right.
Yes. One thing that comes to mind here, again, this is we're gonna winding down now. We're getting to the end here. I'm gonna try and put a final thought here together. And maybe this is just another random thought. We were thinking about things here. A lot of good items, a lot of good topic items here around where we see challenges with doing data things. One of them, I think, is going to be this increasing excitement around AI. I don't think I've seen a news article yet, but there's going to be a news article where someone relies on AI to produce a recommendation, an outcome, and someone uses it, trusting it wholeheartedly.
Yeah.
And in reality, it is totally the wrong thing to do in the business, and the business is going to burn down because of it.
Yeah.
So it's not there yet. I haven't seen a news article, but I'm going to put my ear to the ground here and say, if I'm looking at the landscape of where data and technology and AI is all kind of coming together, it's getting more and more difficult to discern from AI-based things what is really real, what is truth, what is something that I can actually go do versus what is not. And so in all of this, my head goes, prediction of things is very difficult. And, you have to have good data to get there. You've got to have all these, company culture kind of pieces in place, or at least working on them to try and improve them. It's like a living organism. You got to keep working it and making it better and trying to improve as much as you can. But then now with the introduction of AI makes this, I think, even harder now. And now with companies, executive level people in companies pushing, we need AI. We got to put it in place. Where do we put it? It's going to be very important to take those new recommendations in a very metered way. Anyway, so that was just because of where my thought was. I'm waiting for the next article that comes out. So mark my words. I guess whatever episode we're on this one. So episode 247. I'm making a prediction. There's going to be a news article in the future around some company trusting AI that totally led them astray and is now getting this totally wrong and The dangers of AI is coming.
I have a story around this one. We'll have to save it for the next episode. I would say, like final thought, data is hard. And it's harder for those of us that work with it because we need to ensure that data is the driver for discussions, not just opinions.
I like that.
And if people have opinions, that's great. Goals, fantastic, but all of it should and can be measurable, right? It keeps us honest. It keeps everybody in the organization driving towards the same success factors, the same goals, the same everything. And I think it shines a light sometimes on hard conversations and hard pivots. And that's why sometimes you get people who ignore it.
And I think it's okay to not make your goals.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's in this article, particularly with SVB, there's a constant pressure to always win. Yeah. And I think Simon Sinek, who does a talk about I always forget the name of the book, The Never Ending Game,
where business constantly has to reevaluate.
Business is constantly reevaluated. There are rules and certain rules in business, but the game is ever evolving. The game, there is no end. You don't win at business.
There is no end game. Yeah.
There is the end game. I guess it was his Simon Sinek's the end game, but that's another one that I'm like that resonates with me, and I was like, oh my gosh, business is like a perpetual game of risk, where you're kind of always shifting things and always adjusting, and your competitors change and you change, and you're always adapting. So, I like the idea of being able to have a receptive, learning, educating heart as you do these things, because I think the market conditions will change and you need to adapt to them as they come out. Tommy, any final thoughts for you as we kind of wrap up here?
This is the big thing I think moving forward. If you're finding yourself in one of these situations, if you are alone, it's probably the hardest thing to try to move mountains by yourself, because like I said, it really is it's no reporter technology is going to fix this. This is about getting people on board. Yeah. And this begins the conversation to actually get whether some more people involved in what you're trying to do, but you'll find out pretty soon whether people want to or not.
That's true. I agree with that one. Well, with that, we'll kind of wrap it up here. Thank you all very much for listening. Welcome to be back. We're very happy to be back in the podcast doing things for real live again. So thank you all for the chat. Has been amazing. Great ideas, chat. Thank you so much for participating. We really appreciate you. If you like this podcast, if you were challenged by it, if you had some things to think about, if there were some links that we sent out that helped you out, we'd love for you to share that with somebody else. Our only ask to our listeners is just let somebody else know you found the topic interesting and had some value from this topic. With that, Tommy, where else can you find the podcast?
You can find it anywhere it's available. Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Make sure to, Apple, Spotify, YouTube. If you want a question that you want us to talk about, go to the Power BI Tips podcast. Finally, join us live every Tuesday and Thursday.
Tommy's a little bit rusty there.
It's been a bit.
It's been a bit. We got to get you back into it. Anyways, thank you all so much. We'll see you next time.